With Revolution of the Daleks seeing Series 12 coming to a close, as well as the departure of two main characters from the series, it seems right to go back and take a look at exactly what the Chibnall era has given us so far. It's been over 2 years since it started airing, and we've now theoretically seen the complete character arcs for two companions. However, before we dive in, I think some context to this era is important. By 2017, Doctor Who had been gradually slipping out of audience favour. There were various production issues resulted in massively shifted air dates, one series split across 2 years, and an eventual hiatus in 2016 where only one Christmas special aired. In addition to this, showrunner Stephen Moffat had arguably made his seasons less accessible to general audiences. Added complexity in both plots and character drama resulted in a show that didn't quite have the broader appeal of the Davies era. Combine this with the inconsistent air dates, and to many, Doctor Who no longer felt like the reliable show it once was. Despite a slight refresh in Series 10, scaling back the complexity and drama for something more straightforward, Doctor Who almost looked as if it was on its way out. However, during the 2016 hiatus, it was announced that Stephen Moffat would be stepping down, and Chris Chibnall taking over as showrunner. For those who had continued for the eventual 8-year run of Moffat, the chance of a refresh was admittedly exciting. This had only ever happened once in the modern show before, and whilst that had been a relatively seamless transition, the current state of the show meant that no one was quite sure what an entirely new era of Doctor Who could look like. As weeks passed, the discussion around who would play the new Doctor arose. Names like Chris Marshall and Rupert Grint were tossed around, but ultimately the world of Doctor Who was undoubtedly shook by the announcement that then 36-year-old actor Jodie Whittaker would be taking up the part. The announcement of a female Doctor had been greatly discussed for a few years now, and even the show itself seemed to be building up to this concept. The Master received a complete transformation in the form of Missy. The first male-to-female regeneration was shown on screen.
The only time I've been a man, that last body. Dear Lord, how do you cope with all that ego?
And more references to the Doctor's gender were made during Capaldi's last season.
I think she was a man back then. I'm fairly sure that I was too. It was a long time ago.
Of course, such a decision would inevitably split the fanbase, and I myself made a video at the time discussing my thoughts. Unfortunately, most online discussion was often marred by vocal people on either side, attacking the other for their SJW agenda or misogynistic politics. Whilst it may seem kind of silly that the internet would erupt over such a casting, keep in mind that this was only 1 year after the Ghostbusters 2016 controversy, in which a mediocre comedy remake somehow became one of the most politically divisive films of the year. And much like Sony rigging the comment section to support their narrative, I don't think the BBC is entirely innocent in this conflict. Sure, casting a woman isn't a political move, but producing a trailer in which a literal glass ceiling shatters above the new female Doctor, followed by the text, "It's about time," might cause some speculation on your intentions.
Oops.
Regardless, this was still set to be one of the biggest changes to Doctor Who since its revival. This wasn't just the introduction of a new Doctor, or new companion, or new gender. This was an entirely new era of the show on our doorsteps. A female Doctor was guaranteed to bring attention to the series, and for a while the whole world seemed to be buzzing at the potential of this new run. So, on the 7th of October 2018, we got our first taste of Chibnall's vision for Doctor Who, with The Woman Who Fell to Earth. When looking for his fallen bike, Ryan Sinclair stumbles upon a mysterious alien pod. He contacts the police, which introduces Yasmin Khan, an old classmate of Ryan's who is on her probation. As they wonder about the pod, suddenly Ryan's grandma Grace and her second husband Graham are attacked on a train by a mysterious tentacle monster. Yaz and Ryan rush over to save them, but before it's too late, a strange blonde woman called the Doctor crashes through the train roof and disables the monster. Meanwhile, a deadly alien being has emerged from the pod and begins a ruthless killing mission through Sheffield. So, it's up to the Doctor and her new collection of friends to try and stop it. To start this review on a positive note, I do think the first 10 minutes of this episode are pretty well handled. There's admittedly a clunky YouTube exposition vlog kicking things off, but we'll get back to that later. What I think this opening does well is give you a general feel for each character. Ryan is shy and underconfident, Grace is warm but firm, Graham is a charming joker, Yaz's dialogue is a little on the nose.
I am capable of more than parking disputes.
But her frustration at the mundane tasks she's assigned is clear. Character details like Ryan and Yaz attending primary school together feel interesting and new, with potential to explore down the line. Using two simultaneous plot threads also works well to initially balance our large cast. Scenes feel atmospheric and are given time to breathe. There isn't yet the need to have someone constantly explaining everything that's happening. These two plot points unravel until they eventually connect into one with the introduction of the new Doctor. And this is unfortunately where the episode goes downhill. Now, let me be clear, I don't think this is merely a problem with the Doctor herself, but rather how she's been written into this episode. As we've established, this was the show's chance for a fresh start, but unfortunately it soon becomes clear that Chibnall has chosen to follow the same old beats as all prior post-regeneration stories. Doctor falls to Earth due to malfunction in TARDIS, bumps into companions and starts spewing quirky post-regenerative dialogue, then faints while spitting out orange energy. Meanwhile, an alien menace has arrived on Earth and it's up to the new Doctor to stop them in a big speech where they declare who they are. It feels like the Christmas invasion meets the 11th hour meets Deep Breath, and that's not to say this formula is inherently bad, but it's a well-trodden approach that generally writes as if the audience is already familiar with the Doctor. Considering The Woman Who Fell to Earth gained viewing figures of over 10 million, double that of Capaldi's finale, there would undoubtedly be a large number of new viewers who hadn't checked out the show for a long time, if ever. Doctor Who is often at its best when it evolves with the times, so it's therefore a little disappointing that what we got in our first episode was essentially the show running off its own fumes. Following this formula, the new Doctor launches straight into quirky post-regeneration dialogue.
Tongue?
Tongue! Smart boy. Biology. I've lost my TARDIS. It was exploding and then it dematerialized.
This trope works well with characters that know the Doctor since it highlights the uncertainty of the change, but to our brand new companions it comes across as a little alienating, leaving them looking baffled and uncomfortable.
Grace, we're going.
Unlike the 11th hour, the episode doesn't allow time for these characters to actually get to know each other, and instead most of their dialogue focuses on discussing the plot.
When's the next train due?
This is the last one back.
But the doors are locked. How did you both get in? Driver's window was smashed in.
That thing must have killed her as it came through.
Must it? Looks more like she died of shock when it smashed through the window. What was it? Why is it here? Where's it going next? And most importantly, how do we stop it?
Don't have a mum and dad, just an aunt.
I don't even have an aunt.
You're lucky.
I know.
Plus, without the wide-eyed perspective of a child, the Doctor's post-regenerative quirks become a lot less endearing. These factors add to the lack of warmth I feel between our Doctor and companions, and there's this prevailing sense throughout the story that she isn't quite herself yet. The insistence to stick close to the post-regeneration formula harms the episode and leads to various uncreative choices. Moments such as the Doctor fainting happen seemingly because the formula demands it, rather than creating tension or allowing our characters to discuss their thoughts on the situation. Ultimately, I'm disappointed the episode didn't embrace the potential of a time skip and introduce the Doctor after she'd been on Earth for some time looking for her TARDIS. This way our companions would meet a more fully formed version of the character, rather than the unsettled post-regeneration Doctor we got. Trimming unnecessary scenes would enable more time to develop her real personality and her relationships with the companions. Plus, the time skip would create a naturally ambiguous period for the Doctor, restoring a sense of mystery to the character. Future plot developments that currently come out of nowhere could now be better integrated thanks to this gap. This sort of thing was executed well in Series 10, when Bill meets the Doctor as this great professor who's been lecturing at the university for years. The two form a distinct teacher-student relationship, and there's an ongoing mystery which takes advantage of the ambiguous time skip. It's a little ironic that the last series of Moffat's run ended up being more of a refresh than the actual new era of the show. Something else I think this episode struggles with is establishing clear goals and motivations for the companions. Past their initial introductions, there's not really a lot of time dedicated to their thoughts and feelings towards the unfolding events. Yaz obviously wants to do more, though I can't say she seems particularly excited by the action. Meanwhile, our other characters were simply caught up in things, and it's not particularly evident that they're enthusiastic about what's happening.
Grace, we're going.
This wouldn't be as big an issue if our main characters were actively entangled in the plot, but instead the episode's conflict is almost entirely unrelated to them. Once the tentacle coil and pod both disappear, our characters have to choose to actively pursue the plot at hand.
Now we all want answers. Stick with me, you might get some.
And without a clear reason to make this choice, I find it difficult to become invested in them. To try and remedy this, Chibnall introduces DNA bombs, little plot devices that will add stakes and a reason for everyone to get involved. Yet this is introduced 10 minutes after our characters have already started working together.
I'll see if there have been any more reports on that object.
I could have a word with some of my old pals from
I
work.
can search for weird stuff on social media.
And I'll check in with my nurses group on WhatsApp.
It's fine for these characters to be simply dragged into the plot, but to make this engaging you should present our characters actively responding to that. Despite the introduction of literal bombs, this revelation doesn't generate an emotional shift or cause our characters to confront the Doctor. They feel less like individuals with their own distinct goals and more like servants of the plot. When I don't know what these characters personally have at stake and there's an immediate lack of conflict, it's hard to feel any kind of tension. Even the DNA bombs themselves fail to remedy this, with no clear indication of when they'll detonate or what could set them off. They're supposed to kill off witnesses, right?
Simple plan to take out witnesses.
so why haven't they been used yet? If it hadn't been for Grain reminding us, then I would have completely forgotten that they were there.
Never mind that. Are they going to go off?
Again, how long till they go off?
Don't know.
Not to sound like a stuck record, but can I just ask about these DNA bombs? Like, how long have we got left?
Enough questions.
This lack of clear conflict or tension means we unfortunately get scenes of people simply waiting for the plot to progress. The Doctor faints and the companions wait for her to recover. A character we know nothing about sits and waits for the pod to do something. The only tension is the mystery at hand, and once you know what's coming, these scenes are kind of empty. They're ultimately buffers to delay the incoming plot. Conflict doesn't have to be big, and when used effectively, it can tell us more about our characters.
Did they kill Mickey? Is he dead?
I didn't think of that.
Rose's reaction to Auton Mickey feels very believable. Meanwhile, the Doctor's response highlights just how his mind is currently working. We can see the clear contrast between human and Time Lord.
You were right, you are alien.
Look, if I did forget some kid called Mickey...
Yeah, it's not a
it's
kid.
because I'm busy trying to save the life of every stupid ape blundering about on top of this planet, all right?
All right.
Yes, it is!
Meanwhile, our new Doctor acts unrestrained with no one challenging her actions. She completely wipes Ryan's phone, and by the next scene, he doesn't even care. Instead, he just awkwardly delivers exposition.
I reformatted your phone.
No, all my stuff's on there.
Not anymore.
Where are we driving to?
I reckon she's using my phone to track the origin signal for the DNA bombs.
With how much we hyper-focus on the plot, the script forgets to properly explore how our companions feel, and what we do get is painfully uninteresting.
Do you believe she's an alien?
Yeah, I think I do, yeah. Is that mad?
No. I think I do too.
If you are an alien, how come you sound like you're from the north?
Lots of planets have a north.
On a more positive note, this episode's music is overall fairly promising. After Murray Gold's 12 years of incredible work, Nakanola makes for a fascinating change. His grinding and haunting ambient synthscapes create a tense mood throughout the episode that feels distinctly new. However, I do feel he suffers from a problem that also affected Murray Gold's music, and that's being overused. It can feel as if there's a need to have some kind of soundtrack in every single scene, and this typically ends up being some kind of bland ambient droning. The music also has a habit of telling you how to feel by amping up the emotional pads during poignant moments. This is admittedly less of an issue this episode, but it's something that gets worse as the series progresses. On another positive, the Doctor building her sonic screwdriver from scrap is a genuinely fun and interesting idea. It's a new concept that helps distinguish this Doctor from the others, and could have been a brilliant personality trait if maintained throughout the series. It's therefore quite disappointing that this tinkerer side of her only shows up in about 2 subsequent stories. Considering Ryan is apparently training to be a mechanic, it might have been nice for the two to have formed a bond through their similar interests. But they don't, so never mind, I guess. As for the Sonic's design, well, the less said the better. Anyway, once the mysterious pod has cracked open, we finally meet our episode's villain, Tim Shaw, a Stenza warrior. To his credit, he has some interesting ideas behind him, such as his ice-cold skin and face of victims' teeth. But unfortunately, he suffers from being woefully underdeveloped and incredibly derivative. He's yet another warrior race who's conqueror of the 9 systems or something like that. His motivation is effectively that of the Predator, to hunt people on Earth for trophies. But he lacks the technological quirks or excellent design of that creature. Instead, Tim Shaw is just a blue human stuffed in an exosuit, and his gruesome teeth-filled face has only ordinary human teeth. Surely a variety of alien teeth would have been more interesting, and visually communicate just how many species they had conquered. Oh, and that ice-cold skin of his barely factors into the plot, and is instead just a convenient way to kill people. However, possibly the most baffling choice comes with Tim Shaw's target, someone he must retrieve in order to be crowned leader. It's Carl from the train, aka a completely unrelated character who hasn't appeared in an episode since. This decision here adds so much flab to what could have been a much tighter script. Had Tim Shaw's target been Ryan or Grace, this would have introduced far greater stakes and conflict. Our main characters would be in direct danger, and there'd be a greater pressure on the Doctor to figure things out. Then we can forego the need for DNA bombs and stop chasing after the main plot. Instead, everyone is directly involved with the conflict. I just can't see a reason behind choosing Carl. It's not like he offers any thematic commentary, since he's basically treated as a joke.
Somebody out there wants me.
Somebody out there wants me.
It's hard to feel tension for an underdeveloped character who even the episode won't take seriously.
I'm not great with heights! What? It's my dad's company!
Plus, if Tim Shaw needs to claim a human as a challenge to be crowned leader, then why was Carl picked? The 3 people he killed already seemed like greater challenges. Why wasn't Ryan targeted? He gave permission to Tim Shaw after all.
Access was granted.
No.
In fact, why did Tim Shaw need permission anyway? Is that part of the challenge? This is the ultimate problem with Tim Shaw. He feels like a collection of jumbled ideas with a lack of consistency or thought behind them. He's an ice-cold humanoid that wears a robotic exosuit, yet travels in a weird-looking fig thing with magic lights in the sky. Then most of his time on screen is just spent killing random people than actually threatening our main cast. In the end, he's just not allowed to be particularly intimidating or interesting. So anyway, our characters all race towards the third act where they confront Tim Shaw on a crane. I do like how Ryan and Yaz pilot the crane to help the Doctor and end up reading the instructions on their phone. I also think this moment of Ryan's dyspraxia works pretty well and is fairly tense.
Ryan!
We get our "I'm the Doctor" speech moment, which isn't anything extraordinary.
I'm the Doctor. Sorting out fair play throughout the universe. Now please, get off this planet while you still have a choice.
The Doctor's shtick this episode has basically been a case of amnesia.
Are you a doctor, Ryan?
No.
Shame. I'm looking for a doctor. Oh, it's gone again!
She forgets her name up until the end when she then remembers it, but it doesn't really reveal anything new about her character. The issue is this moment is only in here because it's just following the typical episode formula. Most people tend to talk about a moment in the Doctor's first episode in which they clicked for them. For example, the 11th Doctor confronting the Atraxi at the end of the 11th hour. And so we have this entirely manufactured moment that's been put in there to simply mimic that. In the case of the 11th Doctor, he'd already spent the whole episode showing that he was an enigmatic and powerful alien being. Therefore, when he declares that he's the Doctor, it's the point in which the character felt completed, rather than simply labelled in Whittaker's case. A more pressing issue to discuss in this confrontation would be how the Doctor resolves the plot. It irritatingly relies on events that blatantly weren't set up on screen. First, the Doctor pulls out Tim Shaw's recall device, giving her something that she can use to bargain with. However, at most, this recall device was merely identified by the Doctor earlier.
Recall circuitry. It's designed for a return journey.
And there was no indication that she could use it or that she picked it up. It feels a little cheap, though I could forgive this since it is at least mentioned earlier. What's far less forgivable is the payoff for the DNA bombs. Tim Shaw tries to detonate them, but it's revealed that the Doctor used her sonic to remove them and place them inside his tentacle coil, so that when he performed a full transfer, he also absorbed the bombs. Except this event just isn't in the episode. There is no space between them finding the coil and Tim Shaw showing up in which she could have done this. This is the first and only time we as an audience hear of this event, and therefore it feels like a Deus Ex Machina without the proper setup. All we needed was a quick moment in which the Doctor explains she can use the tentacle core to reverse the bombs, and then do so. Also, after Carl kicks Tim Shaw off the crane, the Doctor weirdly asserts her morals over him.
You had no right to do that.
Yeah, I don't really understand her point here. This is a terrible alien that has killed many people and was about to kill Carl himself. Not to mention he was dying and about to teleport away anyway. What difference does kicking him here make? It seems like a weird attempt to maintain the 10th Doctor's morals, but without really considering the context of the situation. Now, another key feature of this episode would be Grace's death. This is another idea that, whilst potentially great in concept, unfortunately falls short for me in execution. Looking back, it does feel kind of cheap to kill her off for the sake of giving Graham a character arc, and I don't feel the episode actually earns her death. The events leading up to it feel very tacked on to the main plot. First, out of nowhere, Grace tries to get involved because apparently Ryan is in danger.
Graham, Ryan's in danger. We don't have time to argue.
Yet there's barely an indication of what this danger actually is. Sure, the tentacle monster cut the crane's power, but that happened nearly 4 minutes ago. Our focus has been on a completely different set of characters with no evidence that the creature was actively pursuing Ryan. The pacing of her death is also strange. By the time Tim Shaw has already detonated his bombs and teleported away, Grace has only just reached the creature. Then she attacks it, but I guess the creature shocks her, which makes her slip and fall. The two events feel really disconnected, and it kinda makes her whole sacrifice look a little pointless. There's no clear reason for her to try and save Ryan, and the main threat is gone by the time she takes action. Whilst I appreciate what they're trying to do here, showcasing Grace's adventurous spirit and desire to help,
Is it wrong to be enjoying this?
it unfortunately falls short in execution for me. Had our plot focused on Tim Shaw actively stalking Ryan, then perhaps Grace's sacrifice could have been better integrated thanks to the tighter script. Really, the inclusion of this Carl character is one of the biggest detriments to the story.
He's got a face of teeth!
And his entire purpose seems to be an excuse for the episode's climax to feature cranes. Grace's death does also lead me back to Ryan's YouTube vlog at the start. This opens up our episode, with Ryan beginning to discuss the greatest woman he ever met.
So today, I want to talk about the greatest woman I ever met. Smart, funny, care then.
Upon first viewing the episode, I was intrigued to see what the series would do with this YouTuber concept and how it might tie into his character. However, Ryan's YouTube channel is ultimately never mentioned in the series again, despite the fact it's even stated he has made videos before.
I've mentioned this on here before.
The true intent of this scene was to set up a gotcha moment for later, in which we reveal the woman Ryan's talking about was actually Grace, not the Doctor. It's also a convenient way to reel off character information without a lot of effort. I think it's a shame when concepts like these are treated in such a disposable manner. Why Ryan makes YouTube videos as a concept ripe for exploration, yet the series seemingly doesn't want to answer these questions. The scene following the vlog also raises some slightly concerning thoughts about how Ryan's dyspraxia is presented in this episode. It's introduced to us quite blatantly through Ryan trying to ride a bike, but a question the series never quite answers is why Ryan even wants to ride a bike in the first place. Sure, he says he wants to make Grace proud, but why is this the way to do that? Without proper explanation, it almost unintentionally reads as Ryan trying to ride a bike to be more normal. In the opening, he's clearly frustrated at having to try, and whilst it's clear he rides it at the end to make Grace proud, I still question what exactly she is proud of. His insistence that he learn an unnecessary skill? This wouldn't have been so much of a problem if the series actually explored these ideas. Then it could have opened up some very interesting character development for Ryan. Maybe initially he's trying to hide his dyspraxia and wants to be seen as more normal, but part of his arc involves embracing it and accepting himself for who he is. Or maybe Grace had a love of cycling, which his confidence and ability kept him from sharing in. But he's learning so that he can join her and make her proud. Her death could then fuel his desire to make her proud, giving him a clear motivation for development throughout the series. Instead, this is quite literally the only mention of this character motivation in the entire series. It begins to feel like Chibnall just read a Wikipedia article on dyspraxia and slapped the first thing he found down. It's there because we need to see his dyspraxia and so Ryan can run into Tim Shaw's pod. Functional, but very vapid. Whilst I can appreciate the attempt at representation, the uncomfortable undertones make it a bit of a missed opportunity. It's a shame that two of the first things we see Ryan doing aren't even part of his character, and are instead used to conveniently deliver information. In Rose, we learn so much about the characters just through visual storytelling. We understand Rose's age and maturity from her bedroom, her social status from where she lives and the job she works, as well as how she feels about her life. Ryan's YouTube channel and bike are the first things we see him do, yet are inconsequential to the character we actually get. On a more positive note, I think Bradley Walsh handles the funeral scenes very well, and Graham definitely feels like the most endearing of the companions. I guess the funeral must have happened within a day or two though, because the Doctor is still in her tattered clothes. I wonder what she was doing during that time. And to top things off, the episode does end on a genuinely great cliffhanger. These things usually end on a new TARDIS reveal, but instead Chibnall opted to teleport our characters into the middle of space. It's not a new concept, but it made for a great surprise and opens up a wealth of storytelling possibilities. Unfortunately, this is a great cliffhanger following a rather weak first episode. There's generally a good energy and pace to things, but the plot at hand has far too many contrivances. Podman primarily exists so the Doctor has a suitable place to build a Sonic, Carl mainly exists so the finale can take place on a crane, the Doctor faints because that's just what she does. I can see why people like it does have a very fresh and new feel, especially with all the new cinematography and music, but when you really break down the plot, there's just not a lot to it other than what feels like a very typical new Doctor episode. Ultimately, it just misses the mark for me in a few too many ways, from the underdeveloped characters to the underdeveloped villain to the underdeveloped plot, and for what could have been a bold new direction for the show, a complete relaunch that would get everyone watching Doctor Who again with a brand new Doctor. It does feel annoying that the series ultimately played it so safe and didn't embrace any new or more creative ideas. And so I'll continue looking through all the episodes, looking at how the series developed over time and pointing out various issues I have. But that was only the first episode of the series. They can't possibly all be bad, can they?